could have stayed home. After Guadalcanal, John Basilone had earned that right. The Medal of Honor hung heavy around his neck as he toured America, selling war bonds to cheering crowds. Movie stars wanted to meet him. Politicians shook his hand. He was safe. He was a hero. He was alive. But heroes don't always choose the easy path. October 24th, 1942. Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. The jungle screamed with Japanese voices in the darkness. 3,000 enemy soldiers charged toward a position held by just 2 machine gun sections. 15 Marines against an entire regiment. The math didn't work. The odds were impossible. John Basilone didn't care about odds. For 3 days and nights, his machine gun had been his lifeline. When it jammed, he burned his hands on the red-hot barrel, stripping it down, fixing it, feeding it ammunition while bodies fell around him. When they ran out of belts, he sprinted through enemy fire to get more. When his men started to break, he held them together with nothing but his voice and his courage. "They're not getting through," he told them. "Not on my watch." The Japanese came in waves, each assault more desperate than the last. Basilone's gun crew dwindled. Friends became corpses. The perimeter shrank. At one point, he fought with his sidearm and a machete when the enemy got too close. Blood mixed with mud. The air tasted like copper and gunpowder. By dawn, over 2,000 Japanese soldiers lay dead in front of his position. Basilone and 2 other Marines were all that remained of his section. They had held the line. They had done the impossible. The Marine Corps pulled him out after that, made him a symbol, a recruiting poster come to life. He could have spent the rest of the war in safety, telling his story to factory workers and schoolchildren. No one would have blamed him. He had given enough. But as he stood on those stages, as he smiled for the cameras, something ate at him. His brothers were still out there, still fighting, still dying. And he was here, safe in America, playing hero while real heroes bled in Pacific sand. "I belong with my boys," he told them. "Send me back." They tried to talk him out of it. His family begged him to stay. The Marine Corps offered him any stateside position he wanted, training recruits, teaching tactics, a commission as an officer, anything but combat. John Basilone had grown up in Raritan, New Jersey, one of 10 children in an Italian-American family. His father, Salvatore, had come from Naples with nothing but hope. His mother, Teresa, raised them with love and pasta and prayers. They were working people, good people. They understood duty. But they didn't understand this. "You did your part," his mother said, tears in her eyes. "You came home. That's all I prayed for." How could he explain it? How could he make them understand that home didn't feel like home anymore? That every comfortable bed reminded him of men sleeping in foxholes? That every hot meal tasted like guilt when he thought of Marines eating cold rations? Before the war, he had been just another guy. Worked in a laundry, drove a truck, played cards on Saturday nights. The Army had seemed like an adventure, so he enlisted in 1934. Served 3 years in the Philippines. When that hitch ended, he came home and tried civilian life again. It didn't stick. By 1940, he was back in uniform. This time, the Marines. There was something about the Corps that spoke to him. The brotherhood, the pride, the certainty that you were among the best. When Pearl Harbor happened, he was ready. When Guadalcanal called, he answered. Now they wanted him to be a symbol instead of a Marine. The war bond tours continued. He smiled, he waved. He told his story 1,000 times. Each telling felt like a betrayal. He wasn't a hero. He was just a guy who did his job. The real heroes were the ones who didn't come home. The ones whose mothers would never see them again. "I'm no museum piece," he told his handlers. "I'm a Marine." Finally, they relented. If John Basilone wanted to go back to war, they couldn't stop him. But they wouldn't send him back alone and unprepared. First, he would train new Marines, show them what he had learned, maybe save some lives with his knowledge. Camp Pendleton, California. The newest Marine recruits looked at him with awe. The famous John Basilone, the machine gun king of Guadalcanal. They expected a giant. Instead, they got a regular guy, 5'9", solid build. Hands that knew work, eyes that had seen too much. "Forget the medal," he told them on the first day. "Forget the stories. I'm here to teach you how to stay alive." He taught them everything. How to strip a machine gun in the dark. how to judge distance by sound, how to move through jungle without making noise. But mostly, he taught them about fear. "You're going to be scared," he said. "That's normal. Heroes aren't the ones who don't feel fear. Heroes are the ones who feel it and do their job anyway." The young Marines hung on every word. These weren't training manual lessons. This was survival, distilled from blood and experience. When he showed them how to set up interlocking fields of fire, he could still smell Guadalcanal. When he demonstrated how to clear a jammed weapon under pressure, his hands remembered that October night. But teaching wasn't enough. Every night he lay in his bunk and thought about the Pacific. The war had moved on without him. Tarawa, Saipan, places where Marines were dying while he played instructor. The guilt ate at him like acid. Then he met her. Lena Riggi was a Marine Corps Women's Reserve Sergeant, dark hair, bright smile. She worked in the camp's administrative offices, processing paperwork for incoming recruits. Their first conversation was about supply requisitions. Their second was about home, both from Italian families. Both understood the weight of expectation. "Why did you come back?" she asked him one evening. They were walking along the California coast, watching the sun sink into the Pacific. "You could have stayed safe. Safe isn't living," he said. "It's just existing." She understood. Maybe that's why he fell for her. In a world that wanted him to be a statue, she saw the man. They married in July 1944, a simple ceremony at St. Mary's Star of the Sea Church in Oceanside. His family came from New Jersey. Her family came from Portland. For a moment, the war seemed very far away, but it wasn't. 2 weeks after the wedding, his orders came through. The 5th Marine Division was forming up. They needed experienced NCOs for something big, something important. He would join the 27th Marine Regiment, leading a machine gun section just like before. "You don't have to go," Lena said, though they both knew it wasn't true. "Yes, I do." She kissed him goodbye at the train station. Promised to write every day, promised to wait. They both pretended he was coming back, because that's what you do. You pretend the odds don't matter. You pretend love is stronger than war. The train carried him west, toward the Pacific, toward his destiny. He could have stayed, could have grown old with Lena, could have had children and Sunday dinners and all the small, precious things that make a life. Instead, he chose his brothers. He chose the Corps. He chose duty over safety, honor over comfort. John Basilone was going back to war. The 5th Marine Division was different from his old unit. These were mostly new guys, fresh from the States. They had trained hard, but training wasn't combat. They looked at him and saw the metal. He looked at them and saw himself before Guadalcanal, young, eager, unprepared for what was coming. "Listen up," he told his machine gun section. "I don't care what you've heard about me. I don't care about medals or newspapers or any of that. What I care about is keeping you alive. You do what I say when I say it, and maybe we all go home." He drilled them relentlessly, not just on the weapons, but on teamwork. A machine gun section lived or died together. The gunner, the assistant gunner, the ammunition carriers, each had a role. Each was vital. Lose one, and the whole system could collapse. In combat, you don't rise to the occasion, he taught them. You fall to your level of training, so we're going to train until your hands can do this in your sleep. December 1944. They boarded ships in San Diego, heading west. Still no one told them where. Scuttlebutt said Philippines, maybe Formosa. The veterans knew better than to guess. The Corps would tell them when it was time. On the ship, he wrote letters to Lena, told her about the ocean, about the men, about everything except the fear that sat cold in his stomach. Not fear of dying. He had made peace with that possibility long ago. Fear of failing these new guys. Fear of not being the leader they needed. The convoy moved slowly across the Pacific. Days blended together, training on deck when weather permitted, weapons maintenance, physical training. Anything to keep the men sharp and their minds off what was coming. Then they got the briefing. Iwo Jima. 8 square miles of volcanic island. 3 airfields that could launch B-29 strikes on Japan. 22,000 Japanese defenders dug into caves and tunnels. No retreat. No surrender. Every yard would be paid for in blood. The officers showed them the maps. The plan looked simple on paper. Land on the beaches, push inland, take the airfields, secure the island. 5 days, maybe 7 at the outside. The veterans knew better. Plans never survived first contact with the enemy, especially not against Japanese defenders who had sworn to die rather than surrender. This wouldn't be 5 days. This would be hell. Write your letters, Basilone told his men quietly. Say what needs saying. He wrote to Lena that night, told her he loved her, told her about the stars over the Pacific, told her everything except where they were going and what they would face. Some truths were too heavy to share. February 19, 1945. D-Day. The morning came gray and cold. The sea was rough, tossing the landing craft like toys. Men vomited from seasickness and fear. The naval bombardment had been going on for days, but everyone knew it wouldn't be enough. It never was. Basilone checked his men one last time. Weapons ready, ammunition distributed, fear pushed down deep where it couldn't interfere. Remember your training, he said. Stay low. Move fast. Watch out for each other. The beach rushed toward them. Black sand. Volcanic ash. Mount Suribachi looming like a monster. The ramp dropped. Let's go, Marines. The black sand was like nothing they had trained for. Each step forward felt like 3 steps back. Men sank to their ankles, struggling under the weight of weapons and equipment. The beach was a killing field, pre-registered by Japanese artillery and mortars. Basilone led from the front, always visible, always moving. When his men bogged down in the sand, he pulled them forward. When machine gun fire pinned them down, he found a way around. The Medal of Honor winner could have stayed in the rear. Should have, according to doctrine. Leaders were too valuable to risk, but John Basilone had never led from the rear. Move! Move! Get off the beach! Explosions walked across the sand like giant footsteps. Men disappeared in clouds of black ash and red mist. A Marine next to him simply ceased to exist, vaporized by a direct hit. Basilone kept moving. If you stopped, you died. His section made it off the beach, finding cover in a shell hole. Japanese fire came from everywhere. Bunkers, spider holes, caves. The entire island was a fortress, and they were attacking it with flesh and courage. Set up the gun here, he ordered. Cover that approach. I'm going to find a better position. He moved alone, scouting for his men. That's when he saw it. A Japanese bunker, perfectly positioned to slaughter Marines trying to advance. Its machine gun had already created a carpeting of American bodies. Someone had to take it out. In his pocket, he still carried Lena's last letter. Her picture. Her love. He could have sent other men, could have called for support, could have waited. Instead, he gathered a handful of Marines and led the assault himself. They moved under fire, using every fold in the ground, every shell hole, every piece of cover. The Japanese gun tracked them, spitting death. One Marine fell, then another. Basilone kept going. He reached the bunker's flank, found a blind spot. Demolition charges in hand, he prepared to end the threat. That's when he saw them. A group of Marines pinned down in the open, about to be slaughtered. Choice time. Take out the bunker or save the men. John Basilone had never been good at arithmetic. He wasn't about to start now. He did both. The demolition charge flew true, landing inside the bunker's aperture. The explosion shook the ground. Before the dust settled, he was already moving, leading the trapped Marines to safety, showing them a covered route he had spotted. Go. I'll cover you. He stayed behind. His weapon, chattering defiance at the enemy positions, made himself a target so others could live. It had always been his way, at Guadalcanal, at Camp Pendleton, here on this black beach. More Marines were advancing now, inspired by his example. The impossible beach suddenly seemed possible. If John Basilone could do it, so could they. They pushed forward, yard by bloody yard. The attack was gaining momentum. Marines who had been pinned down found their courage and pressed forward. Basilone moved among them like a force of nature, appearing wherever the fighting was thickest, wherever men needed leadership most. He had been on the island less than an hour, but it felt like a lifetime. The pre-invasion bombardment had barely scratched the Japanese defenses. Every piece of ground had to be taken by infantry, paid for in blood and courage. His machine gun section was doing its job, laying down suppressing fire, supporting the rifle platoons. Good men, well-trained. They would make it if they kept their heads. He had taught them everything he could. Now they had to learn the rest the hard way. "Gunny, we need you over here." Another crisis, another group of Marines in trouble. A Japanese mortar position had them zeroed in, dropping rounds with deadly accuracy. Men were dying in the open, unable to advance or retreat. Basilone gathered a small team, 3 riflemen, 1 barman, a demolition specialist. Not much, but it would have to do. "We go fast," he said. "Hit them before they can adjust. Questions?" There were none. These were Marines. They knew their job. They moved in short rushes, using the broken ground for cover. Japanese rifle fire cracked overhead. Mortar rounds walked closer, feeling for them. The enemy position was well concealed, protected by interlocking fields of fire. But John Basilone had taken tougher positions. At Guadalcanal, outnumbered 100 to 1. This was just another problem to solve, another obstacle to overcome. He spotted a gap in their defense, narrow, dangerous, but possible. "Follow me." They threaded through the gap, moving like ghosts. The demolitions man prepared his charges. The riflemen provided security. Basilone led them, always first, always exposed. The charges detonated. The mortar position disappeared in smoke and flame. Another small victory in a day that would require thousands of them. But as they pulled back, Basilone saw something that made his blood run cold. A group of young Marines, boys really, had gotten separated from their unit. They were wandering in the open, lost, confused, about to walk into a killing zone. No time to think, no time to plan, only time to act. He sprinted toward them, waving them down, trying to get them to cover. Japanese machine guns found him, tracked him, walked their fire toward him. The ground erupted in small fountains of sand and death. "Get down! This way!" The young Marines saw him, recognized him, started to move. But they were too slow, too green. The machine guns were faster. John Basilone made a choice, the same choice he had always made. He stepped between the guns and the boys, his body a shield, his weapon spitting defiance, buying them seconds, buying them lives. The rounds found him at the edge of the airfield. Multiple hits, center mass, the kind of wounds that don't give you time for last words or heroic gestures. He fell forward into the black sand, his blood mixing with the volcanic ash. Around him, the battle continued to rage. The young Marines he had saved made it to cover, would live to fight another day, would grow old and have families and tell stories about the day John Basilone died for them. But in that moment, as his life poured out onto foreign soil, his thoughts were elsewhere. He thought of Lena, waiting in California, the letters she would write that he would never read, the children they would never have, the life they would never share. 7 months of marriage, not enough. Never enough. He thought of his mother, Teresa, in her kitchen in Raritan, the rosary she prayed every night for his safety, the candle she kept burning at church, the gold star that would soon hang in her window. He thought of his brothers in the 27th Marines, still fighting, still advancing. They would take this island, would raise the flag on Suribachi, would win this war, not because of medals or glory, but because they were Marines, and Marines didn't quit. The black sand was warm beneath him. The sounds of battle seemed very far away. Somewhere a young Marine was calling for a corpsman, not for himself, but for Gunnery Sergeant Basilone. Too late. Some wounds were beyond fixing. They found him with his weapon still in his hands, facing the enemy. Even in death, he was still protecting his men, still leading from the front, still being the Marine he had chosen to be. The word spread across the battlefield like wildfire. Basilone was gone. The hero of Guadalcanal, the Medal of Honor winner who came back when he didn't have to, the man who could have been safe but chose his brothers instead. His death hit the men hard. If John Basilone could die, what chance did they have? But then something shifted. If John Basilone could die, then death wasn't about being brave or cowardly, skilled or unskilled. Death was just death. What mattered was how you lived, how you fought, how you took care of your brothers. The attack pressed forward with renewed fury. Marines who had been hesitant found their courage. Leaders who had been uncertain found their voice. They would take this island. They would win this battle. Not for glory or country or abstract ideals, for John. The machine gun section he had trained fought like demons. They had learned from the best. Strip the gun in darkness, judge distance by sound, stay low, move fast, watch out for each other. His lessons lived on in their hands, their movements, their survival. By nightfall, the beachhead was secure. The airfields were within reach. The impossible first day was behind them. But the cost had been terrible. Good men lost, futures erased, dreams buried in black sand. They buried him in the 5th Marine Division Cemetery on Iwo Jima. Plot 384, a simple cross among thousands. Name, rank, serial number. Nothing about the medal, nothing about the glory. Just another Marine who did his duty. The battle for Iwo Jima raged for 36 days. Not the 5 to 7 the planners had predicted. Every yard cost lives, every objective demanded sacrifice. The famous flag raising on Mount Suribachi happened on day 5, but the fighting continued for another month. John Basilone's machine gun section fought the entire time. They remembered his lessons. They honored his memory. When the island was finally secured, only 3 of the original 12 were still standing. But they had done their job. They had protected their brothers. They had lived up to his example. Back home, the news of his death arrived like a thunderbolt. The Marine Corps tried to soften it, sending officers to notify the families personally. But how do you soften death? How do you explain that a hero is gone? Lena got the telegram at Camp Pendleton. She had been writing him a letter when they knocked on her door, telling him about the California spring, about the flowers blooming, about the future they would build together when he came home. She never finished that letter. His mother, Teresa, was in her kitchen when they came, making Sunday gravy, the smell of garlic and basil filling the house. She knew before they spoke. Mothers always know. The gold star flag went up in the window. The candle at church burned a little brighter. Raritan, New Jersey, mourned its hero. The American Legion post would later be named for him. A statue would be erected, a parade held every year, but those were later. In March 1945, there was only grief, only loss, only the echo of what might have been. The war bond posters with his face were quietly retired. No one wanted to use a dead man to sell bonds, no matter how heroic his death, but his story spread anyway. Marines told other Marines, sailors told their families. The legend grew. He had come home from Guadalcanal covered in glory. He could have stayed safe, could have lived. But he chose to go back, chose his brothers over himself, chose duty over comfort. And when the moment came, he chose to step between death and his men. That was the story they told, the lesson they learned. That courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was action in spite of fear. That honor wasn't about medals or recognition. It was about doing what was right when no one was watching. That love, real love, sometimes meant letting go of what you wanted most. His personal effects were sent home. The letters from Lena, the pictures from better times, the small things that make up a life. His Medal of Honor went to his parents, to sit in a place of honor, a reminder of who he had been. But the real memorial was in the lives he saved. The young Marines who made it off that beach because he showed them the way. The men who learned from his teaching and survived the war. The generations that would exist because he chose to stand between them and death. Years passed. The war ended. The Marines who fought on Iwo Jima came home, built lives, raised families. But they never forgot. How could they? Every breath they took was a gift from men like John Basilone. They told their children about him, not the Hollywood version, not the recruiting poster hero, the real man, the one who got scared but did his job anyway, the one who could have been safe but wasn't built that way, the one who died on his feet, facing the enemy, protecting his brothers. In 1948, they brought him home. The remains of the 5th Division Cemetery were relocated to American soil. Some went to Arlington, some went to hometown cemeteries. John Basilone went home to Raritan to be buried in St. Mary's Cemetery, where his parents could visit, where Lena could mourn, where a grateful town could remember. The funeral was massive. Marines from across the country came to pay respects. Men who had served with him, men who had only heard the stories. They stood in ranks, silent, honoring a brother who had shown them what it meant to be a Marine. Lena remarried eventually, found a good man, had children, built the life she was supposed to build with John. But she kept his letters, kept his pictures, kept the memory of 7 months when she was married to a hero who chose duty over safety. His family created a foundation in his name, scholarships for local kids, support for veterans, ways to keep his memory alive through service to others, because that's what he would have wanted. Not statues or parades, but real help for real people. The Marine Corps named a destroyer for him. The USS Basilone served with distinction in Korea and Vietnam, carrying his name and spirit to new battles. Marines who served aboard her knew the story, knew the standard they had to meet. Camp Pendleton, where he had trained so many Marines, named a drop zone for him, Basilone Drop Zone, where new generations of warriors learned to fall from the sky and land fighting, where courage was taught by example, even decades after the teacher was gone. But the truest memorial lived in the Corps itself, in the way Marines talked about him, in the stories passed from veteran to boot, in the understanding that some things matter more than life, that brotherhood is real, that ordinary men can do extraordinary things when their brothers need them. He could have stayed home. That became the lesson, the choice that defined not just John Basilone, but what it meant to be a Marine. When things were easy, when safety beckoned, when no one would blame you for taking the soft path, what would you choose? John Basilone chose his brothers, chose the hard path, chose to be where he was needed most. And when the final test came, he chose to die on his feet rather than live on his knees. That choice echoed through the decades, through Korea, through Vietnam, through Iraq and Afghanistan. Wherever Marines faced impossible odds, wherever they had to choose between safety and duty, the ghost of John Basilone whispered, "They're not getting through, not on my watch." Today, if you visit Raritan, New Jersey, you can see his statue on Somerset Street. A bronze Marine, frozen in time, weapon at the ready. Tourists take pictures. Locals barely notice anymore. Just part of the landscape, like the churches and the pizzerias and the American flags that fly on every block. But on certain nights, when the light hits just right, that statue seems to come alive. Old Marines visiting town stop and salute. Young Marines on leave stand a little straighter. Because they know. They understand. This wasn't just a man, this was an ideal cast in bronze. The truth about heroes is that they're not born. They're made in moments of decision. Made in choices between easy and right. Made in the space between what you want and what duty demands. John Basilone was made in that space. He could have stayed in the Philippines after his first enlistment. Didn't. He could have avoided combat after Pearl Harbor. Didn't. He could have died on Guadalcanal with his machine gun section. Didn't. He could have spent the rest of the war selling bonds and kissing movie stars. Didn't. And on February 19, 1945, he could have stayed in cover while young Marines died in the open. Didn't. That's the legacy. Not the medal. Not the statue. Not the destroyer or the drop zone or the parade held every September in Raritan. The legacy is the choice, the decision to put others before self. The understanding that some things matter more than living. Every Marine who has ever heard his story carries a piece of that legacy. Every soldier who has ever faced that choice between safety and duty knows his name. Because John Basilone proved something important on that black sand beach. He proved that heroes aren't different from the rest of us. They just choose differently. In the end, that's all any of us can do. Choose. When the moment comes, and it comes for everyone in big ways and small, what will you choose? The easy path or the right one? Safety or service? Self or others? John Basilone made his choice, made it again and again until there were no more choices to make, and in doing so, he left us a question that echoes through time. When your moment comes, when you have to choose between what's safe and what's right, when you could stay home but your brothers need you, what will you do? The answer lives in every veteran who put on the uniform after him, in every cop who runs toward danger, in every firefighter who climbs into the burning building, in every ordinary person who finds extraordinary courage when others need them most. They're all answering John Basilone's question. They're all saying, in their own way, "Send me back," because that's what heroes do. They go back. They choose the hard path. They stand between danger and those they protect. Not because they're fearless, not because they're special, but because someone has to, because their brothers need them, because it's right. John Basilone died at 28 years old. He had been married for 7 months. He had his whole life ahead of him. He chose to trade that life for the lives of young Marines on a volcanic island in the Pacific. It wasn't a fair trade. Heroes never make fair trades, they make necessary ones, so remember his name, remember his choice. And when your moment comes, because it will come, remember that you carry his legacy. The legacy of everyone who ever chose others over self, who chose hard over easy, who chose to go back when they could have stayed home. That's the story of John Basilone, the Marine who had the golden ticket, the hero who was already safe, the man who said, "Send me back." And when they did, he showed us all what it means to be truly brave. Like this video if it moved you. Subscribe to hear more stories of forgotten heroes. Share your own family's military stories in the comments below. This channel exists because these stories matter, because these men mattered, because the choices they made echo through time, reminding us that heroism isn't about being unafraid, it's about being afraid and doing your duty anyway. This channel is for those who believe history is made not only by armies, but by individual courage.